Hey guys, Alec back again. We're going to be talking about pricing products and services correctly, because a lot of business owners don't price things correctly. They think that they're pricing things correctly, and many times they get lucky. But if for some reason you need to mark down some product or cut your price through a negotiation for your services and products, or maybe just services, how low can you go before you actually lose money? And that's a question a lot of business owners, surprisingly, can't answer. They don't know. But it doesn't need to be that way, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in this particular video. I'm going to explain to you how it should be done, and then you can apply it through your own business and get the benefit of understanding what's your break-even on your product or service. Previously, we talked about break-even for the company. That doesn't help you in terms of understanding what it should be for what you're selling individually. So what I mean by that, let's talk a couple of different examples. Let's talk about a retail example. So when we have a retail store, we've got products that we're selling, and maybe sometimes services, but typically it's products. So we want to know what the landed cost is for the product. So that's including all, if it's imported, including all the duties and all the transportation charges, or if we're bringing it in from another out-of-state town, we don't have the customs charges, but we've got transport charges. Anyway, all those charges for the product, we've got our product cost, and then we're going to use some markup value. And typically, retail stores are going to use some percentage markup to cover their overhead and profitability. And depending on what the product is, they're going to use a different type of markup. Okay, so that's a retail example of how things are typically done in smaller businesses. Let's use another example of construction company. So construction company will provide a bid, they'll provide a price, it'll include labor, it'll include how much material they anticipate that's being used, and they'll add those two up, and they'll typically use some factor, like they'll double the price, and that'll be the sale price. And generally speaking, that will tend to work unless you are negotiating in a sense that you have to bring the price down considerably if you want to get the job. And if you still have that opportunity through negotiation. The question is, how low can you go? And the retail example is, how low can you mark down a product that hasn't sold just in order to move it without losing money? Well, if you're just using factors to mark up your cost, that's not good enough. That's not going to tell you what that amount is. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. It's important that you understand this and make sure that you apply it in your daily business, because if you're really not clear on understanding how much money you're making on each particular job, or how much money you're making on the sale of any products or services, etc. So let's move to the whiteboard and let's go through the detail on how that's done. It's not complicated. Like I said, you're going to use your standard income statement, profit and loss, and you're going to pull two numbers off that. Every 3 months, you're going to modify your number and your pricing, and you're going to use it for your pricing. You're going to see how that's going to work. So let's move to the whiteboard right now.
Okay, guys. So I'm here with the whiteboard, but before we get to the whiteboard, I want to just quickly show you which numbers you need to pull. So I'm using an example here. I need two numbers, and you will need two numbers as well. What we're going to need is our total cost of goods sold. And this is any example. So you're going to use a 12-month period. Just use the last 12-month period as a starter. You want our cost of goods sold, and I've highlighted here in yellow. In our example, this is the number we're going to use. And also you're going to need the total overhead, and this is the number we're going to use here. So you do the same thing off your P&L, off your income statement, and you're going to divide your total overhead by your total cost of goods sold, and that's going to be your overhead multiplier. We're going to need that multiplier when we're calculating the break-even price of our product or service, and this is for any product or service. Okay, so let's move that out of the way, and we're going to put the whiteboard back, and we're going to first figure out our overhead. Our overhead multiplier, which is our overhead, which was $713,583. We're going to divide that by 1,202,074. And that is 0.5936, or 59.36%. Okay, so what that tells me is that for any product or service that I am selling, the overhead is going to be 59.36% of every dollar in cost that I have. So I've got to add 59.36% to every dollar that I have a cost. And then when I add that, I'm actually only at break even. There's no profit yet. Okay, so let's clear the screen here and go back to our example. So let's say we have some service that we're going to want to have a cost of $25,000. That's our cost. So we're going to have to add times our overhead multiplier. So in our example, our cost is $25,000 for our service, plus $25,000, which is multiplied by 0.5936. And that, let me quickly do the calculation here. We're going to have to add another this 25,000 times 0.5936 is 14,840. And that means that our total cost for break even is equal to 25,000 plus 14,840, which is 39,840. Whoops. There we go. That's our break even. So when we figure out our material and our labor as 25,000, in our business here in this example, we've got to add in another 59.36% just to cover overhead. There's no profit yet. So once you have this number, you can use your multiplier, whatever that is. Is it 10% or 15% or whatever it might be, 20% profit. Now you know that this is the lowest you can go without losing money. This is the beauty of this method. So it's very simple. You take your cost, you take your overhead divided by your cost of goods sold. That factor in this example here is 59.36% or 0.5936. Take your cost, multiply it by that amount, by your overhead multiplier, and then add it to your labor and material costs and whatever other costs that you factored in as your base cost. So your true cost, after you add, remember this is to figure out how much overhead you need to throw in on every price in order to get to zero. And this is our break even in our example. It's not 25,000, which is what our labor and material and whatever else we figured out. It's actually 39,840. Okay? And then once you know that that's your zero, you can't go lower than that without losing money. Then you can multiply that by whatever factor you need in terms of your expected or wanted profit. And then that gives you accurate pricing for any product or service. It's very powerful stuff. It's very simple to implement. And this way, you know, I can't go lower than this number without losing money. And maybe sometimes you actually have to lose money, but you know how low you can go rather than just using some factor and then guessing to see how low you can go. And then, you know, whatever the fallout is afterwards, it is what it is. So if you can avoid losing money, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do your pricing. Take your base cost, and then what you're going to do is you're going to add your base cost multiplied by your overhead multiplier, which again is your overhead divided by your cost of goods sold over the last 12 months. And I would update that overhead factor every 3 months or so and put it in with your pricing. And that way you can be sure that whenever you can control it, you won't lose money, and you can control to a great extent how much money you can actually make on a particular job. Okay, so that's how it's done. If you have any questions, post your comments or questions down below. And fun fact. Fun fact of the day. The power grid in the U.S. is essentially 3 major areas. The eastern hub, the western hub, and the majority of Texas has its own hub. It's a curious thing, but it is the fact. Not all of Texas is on one power hub, electrical distribution hub, but most of Texas is. So, fun fact. And anyway, that's it for today's video. Again, if you have any questions, post them down below. If you enjoyed what you see, if you learned something, hopefully you learned something. A lot of small business owners and even mid-sized business owners don't know this on how to correctly price their products and services. And this will let you know immediately in your pricing on where you stand. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to share, subscribe, and ring the bell to get the latest videos coming your way to help you improve your business. Until next time, keep raising your profit.